Welcome to the show, folks. This is Wrestling Changed My Life. Here we go.
And I always ask myself two questions. Have you given 100% in your preparation for tonight?
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestle, because if you wrestle, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast. We just witnessed a thunderstorm here in Chicago, but we're hanging in there. Thank you so much for tuning in today. My guest is the great Dan Russell. Dan was a 4-time NCAA Division II champ for Portland State. He handed Pat Smith his first collegiate loss in Pat Smith's first collegiate match. Dan pinned Pat. They went on to wrestle 4 times. Dan won 3 of those, but Pat won where it mattered at the 1990 Nationals. We talk about that, as well as a number of other points in Dan's career. Hope you enjoy it. As you can imagine, this was recorded in part for our research on the Smith brothers. We're releasing an audio documentary this January called The Smiths in partnership with USA Wrestling and the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. So part of this interview will be used in that audio documentary. Moving on. Fan of the Week goes to Paul Bradley. Subject, on my 25th episode, Gable, Jensen, Davis, Tannenbaum, Ferentz. Among my favorites. Can't believe I didn't find this podcast sooner. Amazing content and guests, Paul Bradley. Paul, coming from a stud like you, 2-time All-American for the Hawks, that means a lot. Thank you, my friend. Folks, last but not least, this episode is brought to you by kind of a one-off request this week, folks. This is brought to you by Gable Gold Dual Meet Tournament that's coming up November 13th through the 15th in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It's sponsored by Silver Star Nutrition, and it's the Gable Gold Dual Meet Tournament, November 13th through the 15th in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. All kinds of divisions are giving out singlets, all kinds of goodies. Check it out. Google Gable Gold, Gablegold, Dual Meet, November 13th through the 15th. That's it, folks. Let's give it up for the great and powerful Dan Russell. Peace! Dan Russell, how are you, sir?
Hey, it is great to be with you, and I'm doing really well. Thank you.
And for the folks who aren't watching, just go ahead and introduce yourself, where you're from, where you're at now, and kind of some of the things you've done in wrestling.
Dan Russell. I'm from the Northwest, born in Idaho, and but spent most of my life in the great state of Oregon. Had a great season of wrestling there. Incredible coaches, incredible teammates, opportunity. I think what makes people great is the people around you. Mm-hmm. And I had amazing people around me: coaches, athletes, competitors. A great club, and competed at Portland State University. Had a great career there at Portland State. Then moved to Colorado Springs with my family, and we were there for 5 years at the Olympic Training Center. Competed at the Olympic level, and enjoyed that season as well. And then moved into the coaching world, and currently I live in the Middle East. I'm living in Jordan, and I'm running an organization here called Wrestling for Peace, partnered with USA Wrestling, and looking at the big idea is to wrestle is to struggle and overcome. And I'm of the belief that if you're born and living on this side of eternity, life's a struggle. So you're a wrestler. And whether you've ever walked in the middle of the ring and shook hands with somebody, you're in a wrestling match. Life is a wrestling match. But I believe this: wrestlers have something to share with those in the struggle in life, in how to persevere, how to go through hard things, how to embrace hard things, how to not be afraid of challenges, how to be willing to take on the hardest challenges. I think all those things wrestling teaches. So how do we as the wrestling family come alongside those in the wrestling match of life and encourage them to overcome? So working with the Wrestling Federation here in Jordan, also working with the entire region over here, and looking at ways that we can come alongside partnering the wrestling family with the struggles. And as you know, this part of the world, there are lots of struggles. There's a lot of challenges. But I think wrestling provides an opportunity to bring connection and relationship. So it's we've been here now 1 year. And I'm working on my language skills, and who would have thought at my age I'd be trying to learn one of the most difficult languages on the planet. And I'm often feel like I'm on my back bridging, and but we're, you wake up the next day and you're back in the fight.
You're battling. I like that. Now let's jump back to and for folks who don't know, the Dan and Joe Russell story is huge in length. It's motivational. It's impactful. We're not going to go over every detail today, but certainly look up Joe Russell, who's Dan's older brother, right?
Actually, I'm the older one.
You're the older one.
My brother is we're a year and a week and a half apart. We were raised as twins.
Got it.
So we went through first grade all the way through together, but he's my younger brother, but he's my hero. And
there you go.
He is an amazing man. And I would say, I concur with what you just said. Look up the Joe Russell story. It is absolutely inspiring. You will not find a man that is a better man to look to for wise counsel and advice. He is a wrestling fanatic. You talk about somebody that just is passionate about wrestling and helping people succeed. I'm very proud of my brother.
Indeed. It's an awesome story. And you've wrote a book, Finish Strong, which details, it's your memoir essentially. But we're going to focus some time today on the Portland State days, because you were part of a dynasty, I guess, if you will. Coach Gran, you guys won 2 national titles when you were there. You were a 4-time national champ, which, I'm from the same hometown as Tim Wright, who went to SIU, and
he was the first.
He was the first, baby. First. No one knows that. Thank you.
He was the first. I followed him. I got to be the second. It's no fun being the second guy. It's always the best to be the first. And Tim Wright was the one that opened the door to say this can be done.
Mm-hmm. Amen. So you and your brother both two of the top high school wrestlers in the country. Your brother potentially maybe all time. So you had offers from all over. And the reason I mention that is some people might say, why did Dan Russell go to a Division II school when he easily could have gone to the creme de la creme of D1 schools? So how did you get to Portland State to start with, and what was the draw there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I will tell you, from the time I was born, there was only one school my dad ever talked about with wrestling. And that was Oklahoma State. As you know, Oklahoma State had been a perennial powerhouse, and the wrestling history at Oklahoma State was huge. I had full rides at Iowa, Oklahoma State, Minnesota. I mean, all the powerhouses at the time. I went and did my official visits. In my mind, though, I had always, because my dad had always talked about Oklahoma State, I thought, I'm going to be a cowboy. I'm going to go wrestle for Oklahoma State. That was the dream. But, the situations, circumstances that came around with my brother, as people research the story and get to hear a little bit of my brother's journey. My brother was in a very serious motorcycle accident. And he was at the time in rehab. They told us 7 reasons he shouldn't have lived. He should have died instantly. They didn't give us a great prognosis. And my brother's story is a miracle. And I mean, we could talk all day about my brother's story, but the point for me was there was a place where I thought, you know, if I leave and go out of state, I'm going to talk to my family. I know my family. They're optimists. They're going to say everything's great, but I'm not going to know it firsthand. And I felt like I needed to be close to my brother and watch him through his recovery process, be there for the family. And looking at all the options and looking at all the places, you know, Marlon Braun came and picked me up. I didn't even visit Portland State. It wasn't even one of my visits. I hadn't seen the campus, which literally was 20 minutes away from my home. He came and picked me up. We went for a little drive in a car. And Marlon just said this simply. He said, I would love for you to come wrestle for me at Portland State, but I want you to know we can't offer you what the schools that, you know, you have opportunities to go to. But I will tell you this, I will do everything I can in my power to help you make world teams, Olympic teams, whatever you need to do in that. And he said, I will do everything within the NCAA regulations and within the NCAA rule books. And he was so genuine with the way that he talked with me, as well as sharing the integrity as a coach, that he wouldn't bend rules, break rules, that he was going to follow these parameters, but he would give me the best opportunities that I could. And that if I needed to go on a trip in the middle of the season with the national team to travel overseas, right in the middle of the college season, he said, I will let you pursue that dream. And I came back from that and thought, you know, that is a coach I could wrestle for. And I think the gift that Marlon Braun gave me of all, he's an amazing man, but the greatest gift that I got from him is Marlon is the guy that loves wrestling. And we didn't go to a tournament where Marlon wasn't the last guy to leave the gym. Even if every one of our guys were out, Marlon was going to stay and watch the last match of that tournament because he loved it. And his passion for wrestling was contagious. We would sit in his office and we'd talk about wrestling, and we'd hear the stories of the late, great Rick Sanders, who wrestled at Portland State, and Doc Westcott, who was the head coach at Portland State at the time with Rick Sanders, would come in. And you're getting to be a part of a place that had history, a great history, first world champion in U.S. History, Rick Sanders, 1967. But you're also getting to be a part of making history. And we had a great team assembled there. Again, great workout partners, great coaches, and great competition.
So when you guys won the team title in '89, you had 5 champs. Were those the only 5 that made it to nationals? Or did you have a full team that was going and scoring points?
Yes. We had 5 guys make the trip. And that trip was a disaster from the beginning. We had flights canceled. We missed flights. None of our luggage showed up. Every one of us were way overweight. And we had big problems, huge problems. We arrived there. We're cutting weight in a towel because we got nothing. The hotel, when we arrived, because we arrived so late because of all the cancellations, they canceled us. So we didn't have our hotel. We had to travel way, I think it was an hour and a half or 2 hours out of town to find a place that we could stay. We got in a car wreck. Everything that you could think that could go wrong went wrong, but the wrestling. And the 5 of us I think with all of the outside things that were going on, really focused us to just be fixed on wrestling and competing. And none of us wanted to be the guy that lost. and we just kind of got on a roll, and then in the finals there we were, one after one after one after one. Winning 4 titles was great, but I tell you, winning a team title with your friends is even greater. It's not something you go home that you did alone, but it's something that it's a shared experience together. And that team effort, when a team from the guy that's battling through the consolations and battling back there's just something special about a group of people that say we're committed to something that's bigger than just ourselves. And that was kind of the experience that year for us.
It's just crazy that you took 5, all 5 won, all 5 were from Oregon. I mean, I had no idea about this story until I started researching this morning of the 2 titles you guys won in 89 and 90. It's awesome.
Yeah, it was really a unique experience that when you're looking at where are you going to go, where are you going to wrestle, and trying to make the best decision. The thing that I felt I needed to commit to when I said yes to Portland State was that I shouldn't look back and wonder what if. That if this is where I'm saying yes to, then say yes and make that yes count. And do what you can to be the best that you can be with what you've been given. And so said yes there. Glad that I said yes there. Loved wrestling under Marlon Braun. What a gift, not just to Portland State. He's been a gift to wrestling in our state, but also he's a Hall of Fame coach, and I think a gift to the sport of wrestling.
I'd love to learn more about him at some point. I mean, he sounds like just like you said, a diehard, someone who's not doing it for himself. He's doing it for wrestling. So I really enjoyed reading about him. Now, January 1990, you've won 2 national titles. Portland State is the defending national champs. Okie State comes to town. Was the duel at Portland State University, or was it somewhere else?
It was at Portland State University. Yeah, it was a night we had a great duel with Oklahoma State. The only thing that I wish could have happened is, one of our teammates, a man that I dearly love and respect, Travis West, who has passed away. He was in the hospital that night because he was sick with what ended up eventually taking his life. Same disease Walter Payton had. And I could tell you a lot about Travis. He was an amazing, amazing man. But here's our guy. He's an Olympian. He's amazing. He was not in our lineup that night. And if he had been in that lineup, I guarantee you we would have went 5-5 with the defending national champs, Oklahoma State. And I think because of the wins with the pins and those things, I think we had a shot at winning that duel. And it's pretty special.
Man, so take me into the gym. What color were the mats? Was the arena full? Was it empty? What was the atmosphere like in that gym in 1990?
Oklahoma State, and what I love about Oklahoma State and why they're such a great program is they've got great fans behind them, the support around them. And Oklahoma State comes to town, they're defending champs. The gym was packed. The mats were green because that's Portland State, the Vikings at the time. And boy, I miss the fact that Portland State dropped wrestling with the rich history that they have there, because events like that just show what the potential is there. It was electric. People were on their feet. It was a great night. Even though we lost the duel, it was a great night. And I think that night it was clear that Portland State was a solid team at any level. And it was a really fun night.
And what was your perception of John Smith going into that meet? Was he a star at that point or not yet?
John Smith was a superstar. He was a superstar that night. And John was, obviously sitting in the corner as the coach. But yeah, he American hero. You're talking about someone that I think everyone in the wrestling world respects, someone that has done amazing things. You know, I was at a wrestling camp. We were doing a camp together, and John was, you know, obviously one of the main headliners, and John was such an unassuming wrestler and just tough as nails, and his technique, his strategy, his game plan. He was going to compete, and you had to know you're going to be in a battle if you're going to go against John. And he's showing this little move that he does called the low single. Now, anybody that knows John Smith and wrestling knows he's pretty good with it. I remember one of the kids looking at him saying, "Oh, that'll never work." John, you know, had won a couple Olympic gold medals and a few world championships in between those. And I'll never forget John. Look at this young guy with this. No, it works. It works at the highest level. And, you know, what an honor it is for us as a wrestling family to be able to be around people like the Smith family. To be able to be a part of a camp where John Smith's teaching technique, and to be able to sit there and take notes and to watch him interacting with kids. And I think that's one of the things that I love about wrestling is, you know, you'll see a guy that will win a match, and a guy come over that lost, say, "What did you do? How did you do that?" And you'll see them get down there. "Well, I did this." And you want to do, we learn from each other. We grow from wrestling. And, you know, I tell my wrestlers this: I want you to love wrestling more than winning. And if you love wrestling more than winning, winning is going to take care of itself. But if you love winning more than wrestling, you're going to quit. It's too hard. You're going to get discouraged. I've seen how many state champions come out of high school and they start college, and it's a whole nother level. And you're starting back at the bottom. And they loved winning more than they loved wrestling, so they end up quitting the sport that I think they could have had great success in, but they stopped too soon. Love wrestling. Embrace the struggle. Embrace the challenge. Love wrestling more than winning, and winning will take care of itself. Yeah, the Smith brothers, they're heroes in our sport, and I think they're people that obviously the wrestling family, and especially as an Americans wrestling family, we ought to be proud and celebrate the success that they've had, not just as athletes, but now as coaches. You know, I was a couple of years ago, I was in Arkansas, and you know, Pat Smith has moved to Arkansas, was working with the team there, and Pat didn't know that I was in town, and I showed up at his club, and I'm dressed in at the time I had a meeting, I was in a suit, and I had my dress shoes on, and I broke the cardinal rule, but I did it intentionally. I walked in the gym, and I walked on the mats with my dress shoes on, my suit, and I'm walking towards Pat, and I'm watching his face, and I could see the look on his face, like, who is this old guy walking in on my mats in those dress shoes? And I got about 5 feet from him, and all of a sudden, he recognized me. And it's a moment I won't forget. We obviously embrace each other. Wrestling, the thing that I also love about wrestling is it teaches respect between your opponents. I mean, Pat was obviously one of the opponents that I faced a lot, thought about a lot, trained a lot to prepare to compete against, and yet here we are now, two old guys, and we're embracing each other in a wrestling room. And then he took me around and showed me what they're doing there, and the amount, what he's done in Arkansas there, the level of wrestling and the improvement that's happened there, it's remarkable. And you just look at it, you know, how many guys have been very successful on the mat, but not taken their success that they had and helped others become successful. And I got to tell you, it was a proud moment for me to go, here's Pat Smith. making a difference in these young lives, changing lives through the sport of wrestling, and doing a really good job. So it's wrestling puts you around those kinds of people.
Yeah.
People that not only were champions, but produced champions.
And it's
I love
amazing.
that.
I mean, I'm from Illinois, and we love our wrestling here in the Midwest. They have more colleges that wrestle in Arkansas now because of Pat. And I know there's some other guys involved, but mainly Pat driving that. So, when did you find out that night that Pat was going to pull his red shirt against you? And were you familiar with him before that?
It was the Smith brothers. I mean, Leroy. So Leroy was one of the main recruiters when I went to Oklahoma State. And, Leroy, John, Pat, everyone, the list goes on and on with the Smith family and their wrestling accolades. It surprised me that happened. They had a pretty good guy at that weight that, I battled against Jeff McAllister, who was a stud. That they put Pat in place of, and then Pat transferred, I think, to Fresno State and wrestled for them.
And you beat him in the quarters to get to Pat. You know that? McAllister, you beat McAllister in the quarters for Cal State Bakersfield to get to Pat. And that's the guy who Pat beat out. That's crazy.
That's right. Yeah. No, and Jeff was a stud. Jeff knocked me out in that match. This little technique that he did, and it fortunately the ref stopped it because he would have turned me and it was over. The lights were out. Jeff was tough, So it was a surprise. But my thinking at the time, I'm in my junior year, I'm older, I'm stronger, into his first match. I had a great match that night against him, but then I wrestled him again shortly after that. And it was a lot closer match than that first night. And I think by the time we got to the NCAAs, Pat was extremely well coached in his strategy. The score that our match that we had at the NCAAs was it was not a great score on my end, but the score did not reflect how bad he beat me in that match. His strategy, his tactic. He wrestled a perfect match. And I think that's one of the things that, Pat went to the NCAAs, he wrestled it like he wrestled any other tournament. And Pat was one that didn't want to lose. And he was well prepared. I think he was well coached. And he just went out and wrestled. And go ahead.
How would you describe his style?
Well, the Smiths, I think all of them have the ability to change levels really, really well. One of the things that they did well with me in that match was I was a straight ahead. I'm gonna wear you out, in my opinion. I'd get him right to the edge of the mat. And the way that he wrestled the edge of the mat was masterful, really. His strategy around that, he knew when he was getting in trouble, he could get out of the mat, but he would wrestle in a way that he was going to get the advantage at the edge and get the takedown. He wrestled just a really excellent match. It was not a good time to face Pat Smith and have him have a well-executed match.
So what happened in the first match? I know the outcome, but I've never seen videotape of it. I don't even know if there is videotape of it, but take us through the match from what you can remember.
Yeah, I pinned him with an armbar. A little armbar hook that I do. The club program that I grew up in was an excellent club program. but we would focus, we were 4 to 6 hours a day, 6 days a week as a kid. And our coach at one point said, okay, we're going to learn arm bars. And we spent 4 months, 4 to 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for 4 months where we did nothing but arm bars. And guess what happens at the end of those 4 months? An arm bar. And so there was some things, I think, with the program I grew up in, having success and just being well trained in that arena. I remember getting that arm bar, I'd taken him down at John's in the corner, and he said, build a base. I got him on his belly, and I'm waiting for him to build a base so I could hit that hook, and then took him to his back, and that was Pat's first introduction to NCAA wrestling. And then he spent the rest of his career introducing other people to NCAA wrestling.
Wow. I didn't know how it went down in terms of the technique and the hold. And then to your point, you guys wrestled either the next day or the next 2 days at the Portland State Invitational. You said it was closer. What about that one? I'd love to hear how that one went.
Yeah.
How did that match go through? Like walk us through it.
I think I pretty much controlled the momentum of the match. There wasn't really a point in that match where I was felt like I was on my heels. I think just good, but it was a good hard-nosed match. I remember Ed Alverdi was one of the famous commentators, did so many Olympic Games and World Championships, and he was commentating the Oregon Wrestling Classic, and it was on television. And I remember him talking about this freshman and going against this junior, and nobody expected it to be as close as it was, really. And I didn't expect it to be as close as it was. And you look at the improvement from the first night to 2 days later, and I often tell people, I wrestled Pat 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
I only talk about 3 of them. But here's the truth. Pat beat me when it mattered. And he did it as a true freshman. And what he accomplished was remarkable. And I have great respect for Pat. I have great respect for the way that he stepped out to compete. And I know that first night, I know John was not happy. I know they were wondering if they made the right decision in pulling his red shirt and having him step out. I know all those questions were there that night. But we look at the results, and they made the right decision.
I think so. Obviously, and there is there's some great stories that Joe C went up to him and really trashed him pretty bad after that, and then Pat made up his mind and obviously got back on the horse, and the rest is history. Knowing you were a big visualizer, if we're 5 minutes out from the match, what is your self-talk and what thoughts are going through your head before that first match with Pat?
Yeah, I really tried to focus on what it is that I would do. I had a routine. I'd spent a lot of time warming up. I trained hard. I wrestled hard. I ran miles and miles and miles. And so I'd make sure I get a good warm up before I stepped on the mat. And I always ask myself 2 questions. 2 questions that I always felt if I could answer these 2 questions correctly, I'd be a champion. And so everything that I did was preparing to that place where I'd step to the edge of the mat, and I'd close my eyes, I'd take a deep breath, ask myself 2 questions. And this was the questions I would ask. Have you given 100% in your preparation for tonight? And I would think back to every time I stepped my foot on the wrestling mat? Did I give 100% in my preparation? Every practice that I would go in, when my foot touched the mat, I would start running as soon as my foot hit the mat in the room, and I would make a declaration. And I memorized this declaration, and this is what I would say. Yeah! I memorized that. But what I was doing in that moment, as I'm running and saying I was saying yes to the work. I was saying yes to the pain. I was saying yes to the struggle. I was saying yes to giving 100% in my preparation on that day. And that just was part of my rhythm. So the first question I always asked was, have you given 100% in your preparation? The second question I always asked myself was this: are you willing now to step in the middle of that ring and give 100%? And if I could say yes to those two questions, I was a champion whether or not my hand got raised. Because I can't do more than 100%. I can only do what I've been given. And on this day, this is what I've been given. And so I'm going to do 100% with what I have. And sometimes what you have doesn't measure up. Sometimes what you have is you're facing somebody that has just an incredible night and does everything right, and everything doesn't seem to go your way. For me, it wasn't about the wins or losses. It was about making a decision to be the best I could be with what I'd been given. And that's where I always wanted my mind frame to be. High school, I won 4 state titles, was undefeated in high school. The pressure that comes, we even had morning announcements at our high school that, hey, come tonight. Dan Russell's going to go up 2 weight classes. You're going to wrestle the returning state champion from such and such a school. Come see tonight if he gets his first loss on his wrestling record. And it would have to do. But the pressure of that, if it's about winning, is too much. I had to bring it back to what could I control. I couldn't control wins or losses. I couldn't control if my opponent was stronger or had more experience. I couldn't control if he was a true freshman. You can't control any of those things. And so my preparation was always to focus on what can I control. And that was my ability to say yes to being the best I could be with what I've been given. And sometimes I got my hands raised and sometimes I didn't, but I could always walk off the mat with my head held high.
Mm. And so how would you articulate that into goal setting? So going in, that would have been your junior year. What were your goals that year as a junior in college?
Well, I clearly I wanted to be an NCAA Division I All-American. That was my goal. I fell short of that goal, but that had been a goal. Also, the Olympics was
Division
a goal.
I All-American or national champ?
National champ.
You said All-American, so I was like, you did All-American though. Yeah.
No, I wanted to be the champion. And I was in the mix. NCAA is one of those tournaments. You're those 8 guys, those All-Americans. You wrestle the match the next weekend. Things could change completely in a week. It's being right time, right place, right, just everything clicking. So when you look at what Pat Smith did in winning 4 NCAA titles, it's amazing. It really is amazing what he accomplished. Because 4 times he stepped into that gym, right place, right time, right preparation, right attitude. Didn't let the pressure get to him. Winning your first title is great. The second, the third, the fourth, it's a whole nother pressure. There's a different weight that's on your shoulders, and he was consistent and he did it.
And you talk about the NCAA tournament, Pat doing it 4 times. It's really 12 times because it's a 3-day tournament, and each day is kind of separate and distinct from the next day because you warm up, you stop, you warm up, you stop. For someone who's just like the layman wrestling fan, doesn't know what the NCAAs are all about, How would you kind of describe the format of it, the 3 days, and just how grueling it is of a tournament?
It's grueling. It's emotional. I can tell you this, that tournament was just a couple years ago for me. In fact, I had a full head of hair back then, and my hair wasn't blonde. But I still today wake up in the middle of the night having dreams about that match and about that tournament. It's intense. And you look at the amount of great athletes at the high school level and the percentage that actually get to go on and compete at the NCAA level. And then you look at the percentage of those that actually get to wrestle in that tournament. Every person you face out there, every time you shake hands, you're going to be in a battle. I mean, you're not going to get somebody that hasn't spent thousands of hours on the wrestling mat. So yeah, the competition, the competitiveness, the preparation. I mean, you got two warriors that are trained warriors that have spent, their life. I won my first state championship when I was 5 years old in the 8 and under division. And you just grow up around the sport, and it's all for that moment. I mean, years and years and years of dedication, of blood, sweat, tears, of embracing hard things. And there's not a person that competes at that Division I NCAA tournament that doesn't have a long list of accolades behind them from years and years and years of wrestling.
And how did it come to be, or how did a Division II wrestler qualify for the nationals back then?
So I was the very last wrestler from the Division II level to get to compete at the Division I level. And so I got grandfathered in. They changed the rules after I had gone to Portland State. We had another, a great wrestler who just passed away this year, who was another man that I greatly respect, Carlton Hasselrig, who was a great example, I think, for us at the Division II level. Say, yeah, you can do this. And he was one of those guys who took you under your wing and encouraged you, and was, a great man. But so I was the last guy to get to do that, to compete at that level. And it's one of the things I love about wrestling is wrestling has always been a sport that you can go as far as you want to go, because it's up to the amount of work and the time and the effort that you give. And that, some of my best competition were some NAIA wrestlers. Mm-hmm. I wrestled some studs. I remember losing to a guy 3-2. I couldn't believe that I lost to him. It shocked me. How could I lose to this guy? A guy from Simon Fraser, Chris Wilson. And a few months later, he gets a silver medal at the World Championships. Oh, okay. Well, I guess he's pretty good.
Or even that guy you wrestled, Kip. He was pretty good, right?
It doesn't matter the level that you. Kip Christoph, and you talk about a wrestling family. I mean, his father, Olympian, of one of the heroes of our sport as well, and a great one, another great one. And that's what I love about this, though. I mean, that's what's fun is you prepare and you prepare and you prepare, and then you go out and you shake hands. You get to test yourself. You get to test your preparation. You get to see where you're at and what you need to improve on and what works, what's not working. And it's a chess match in a very physical way.
Very much so. And when you take all that into consideration, all the hours spent, the fact that you were one of the last, if not the last Division II wrestler to compete at that tournament, when you think about the 90 nationals and knowing that Friday morning you beat McAllister, right? Knowing you beat McAllister, you went back to your hotel, you had probably 5-6 hours. what was your kind of routine there to get yourself feeling good? Was it to not think about wrestling? Was it to think about it? I mean, take us back to your headspace in the hotel before the Friday night semis in 1990.
Yeah. McAllister knocked the wind out of me. He really did. He was a stud. He was a good one. And I think that's what's really interesting about the move that Oklahoma State made with bringing Pat into the lineup. It wasn't that they didn't have somebody in there that wasn't a stud. Jeff was a stud. He was he was a competitor. So, but I think that's what makes everyone great. That match took a lot out of me. I don't know that I ever physically recovered the rest of that tournament after the match with McAllister. He had this little move he did off the top. He'd come up, he'd lock you up and cinch you over and lights out. And fortunately, I got through that match. A miracle, really was a miracle. But I felt after that match, my reaction time was just not as sharp as it should have been, could have been. That's why I said that tournament, right place, right time, everything kind of lining up. And wrestling's one of those sports where you get different styles that match up with different styles, and people have it makes it very interesting. Yeah. Very, very interesting. And so for me it was trying to get myself rehydrated, after making weight, get myself focused back in. I think for me the way that I wrestled, the way that I competed, was never trying to compete against somebody, but really trying to compete here, what's going on in me. And I always loved going over and shaking hands with my opponent before a match and saying, hey, let's go put on a show for these folks. And because my job was to go out and to be the best I could be with what I've been given. That was my job. And I didn't need to hate the person I was going to wrestle. I didn't need to have, I didn't need any of that. I needed my head to be in, we're going to go wrestle hard. I'm going to put everything out there on the mat. And I hope my opponent does the same. And at the end of the day, people are excited about what they saw. And that would help me get into the right frame of mind. And I think loving to compete is important. And I can't think of a family that loved to compete more than the Smiths. Really.
For real.
And when it mattered, they were going to compete. And they were consistent. And what an honor for me. Huge honor to have been able to shake hands with that family and to be able to test myself.
It's incredible. And the fact that you were as accomplished as you were, and just the tie-ins and wrestling, and I'm never ceased to amaze at how small the wrestling world is and all the connections with you and McAllister and just all this stuff. It's hard for me to imagine that it's all so connected. You mentioned something earlier I wanted to come back to, and that's, when you were training, you would think about your opponents just like anyone does, and Pat occupied some mental real estate there. So can you talk about any moments where you were training and maybe thought about him leading up to the couple of times you wrestled?
Yeah, well, I think especially after that year, 1990, my plan was to come back 1991, 158 pounds, and we were gonna do that battle all over again. I actually changed a lot of my wrestling strategy around with a focus of Pat wrestling him the next time. I did wrestle him in the Sunkist Open after the 1990, and competed with him with some of the things that I'd kind of changed in my wrestling, and I think I beat him 10-4 or something like that.
Oh, you beat him? So you're 3-1 against him?
Yeah, I wrestled him 4 times, but I'll only talk about 3 of them. And so my plan was come back that next year. I saw some things that I'd changed and shifted, and it seemed to work, and a pretty good strategy. And then we started looking at that year in 91. Our team was stronger in 91 with me up at 67. So I wrestled for a big chunk of that year at 67 and was ranked number 1 at the Division I level at 67 for a large portion of that season. And Marlon sat me down and said, listen, for us to have the most success at Division II Nationals, we got a 58 pounder is pretty solid. And he would do better, have a better chance if you stayed up at 67. And he talked me into staying up a weight. And I had spent the majority of that season preparing for Pat. So that was a whole nother little shift for me that changed. And you know, I had a decent tournament that year at 67. But you know, I my focus had been that whole year was I was going to go back and wrestle 58, wrestle Pat. And this is what we're going to do. And but you know, those are some of the decisions and choices you make. And you know, I think the important thing in the midst of all of it was making a decision, and you don't want to look back. And yet the temptation is always there in the middle of the night when you wake up, reliving some of these moments and these matches and decisions. But those are the places where you also get to learn the most. I had a great finish to my career wrestling in that year. 91 was in Iowa, and Pat would go on to win his 2nd national title that year at 158. I had a heartbreak match in the semifinals against Mark Ryland from Iowa.
Of course.
In Iowa, riding time, lots of things that I look and say, I don't know why that happened. And, you know.
Was the place going crazy?
Oh, it was going crazy. But one of the things that happened after that match, and I think Iowa, when they saw the finish of the match, you know, I gave Mark a hug, congratulated him, because I put everything I had out on the mat, and things didn't go my way. And what do? Your job's give 100%. You did it. It's over. It didn't fall the way that you had planned. The Iowa fans adopted me that year. People started carrying signs that said Portland State, Iowa. Every time I stepped on the mat, they gave me a standing ovation just for stepping on the mat. I remember getting a forfeit. They raised my hand. The place is on their feet cheering for me. Oh. And interesting, I wrestled an Oklahoma State guy that the Iowa fans loved me beating an Oklahoma State guy, which is a funny story in a way because, you know, he's one of my favorite guys to compete against, and we had some great matches. A guy by the name of Ray Brinzer, who would the next year transfer to Iowa, and the Iowa fans would then embrace him. But that year he was the enemy because he's from Oklahoma State. And the place went nuts when I wrestled Brinzer and beat him there, I think, to go in for the 3rd and 4th match. But
91's one of my favorite nationals.
You know, those are great memories. I think coming out of a Division II school. Yeah.
Sorry, the delay is vicious here, but I was just going to say, and I'll turn it back over to you. Yeah, 91 was fun because Iowa hadn't won in like 4 or 5 years. The Nationals were at Iowa. You know, Tom Ryan and Pat Smith had one of the best matches I've ever seen, and so you were there as part of that. Have you ever gone back and watched that one?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love this sport, and I love going back, looking at matches. I love watching the matches today. Wrestling, what a great sport! Really, what a great sport.
The best. It's been awesome to hear you talk about this, and I feel like this conversation's a little selfish because we're talking a lot about the documentary, and there's so many stories I want to go into. Like when you came back from the airport, your senior year, and you put your trophy in your apartment, then you laid down your floor and kind of had a moment there, and you kind of broke down and you realized how lonely life was. And I think a lot of champions feel that way. So I just wanted to ask if we could close down with that. Talk us through that story and what happened.
Yeah, after winning my fourth NCAA title at the Division II level, I remember coming home. Every reporter in Oregon was there. Everyone wanted interviews. Those are fun moments, fun memories. I get done with my last interview and I look around and realize that my coaches, my teammates, they didn't want to wait around for me with all these interviews, so they went home. So I get in a taxi and I've got my fourth NCAA title. I've got 3 of those years I got the most pins in the least amount of time, and 3 of those 4 years I was named the outstanding wrestler. So I had all these trophies that this is what I worked for. And I remember sitting in the taxi thinking, I can't wait till I get home. I'm gonna put this up on the wall, and I did it. And so I taxi got me home. I rush up into my apartment and I put the trophies up. And I started crying. I began to realize if my life is about these trophies, if this is what my life is about, it's not enough. There has to be something more than this. And I had great success as a wrestler, as an athlete. I made a lot of good decisions in life, but I'd come to a place in my own life where part of me had just said to God simply this: God, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to do life my way. And the truth was, my way was pretty successful from a world standpoint, but from a heart standpoint, from what was going on inside, it hit me that if my life was about these things that fade and these things that don't last, these things that might have some value from a world perspective but have no value from an eternal perspective, I need to make a shift in my life and what's really important. And that was a night that I laid on my floor and wept all night and just asked God if I could redirect the focus of my life, not towards temporary things, but towards eternal things. And it really helped, I think, put things more in perspective and focus for me, into doing things with a renewed. I still wanted to be successful. I still wanted to go and compete and do well, but I wanted to do it for the right reasons, not for a trophy that sat on a wall, but for something that had a prize that was far greater than that.
Awesome. Wow. I love that. And that alone could be an hour-long conversation, but I appreciate you sharing that. Dan Russell, it's been an honor, sir, to research you, read your book. Again, it's called Finish Strong, available on Amazon. Then you also have a website, battleground.tv, I believe it is. It's just been a real honor, sir. Any last words before we let you go here?
Love wrestling more than winning, and winning will take care of itself.
There we go. Thank you very much, sir. You have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Hey, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. And all great things must come to an end. If you want to hear more from the podcast, text WRESTLE to 555-888. That's WRESTLE to 555-888. You can also find us on Instagram, Wrestling Changed My Life, Twitter, Ryan_N_Warner, as well as our website, WrestlingChangedMyLife.com. Take care, y'all. 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 Take care.